name's Dave Dufour. Y'all did read what this is about, right? Because it's not going to be super exciting, and it is right after lunch. AI is a data problem. You all know that to build models, to grow things, you need billions, if not trillions, of data points. We're not going to talk about building models today. We're going to be talking about taking automation to put data into models that already exist, and then how that can help your customers. So one thing that is a little, as I'm at the event, this is the second year I'm here, I'm finding out that I'm the CTO at Propulsion. We actually don't use automation internally yet, but we are selling a significant amount of automation to our customers. So I'm a little bit, we're backwards in that we need to automate internally, but we currently do take automation, implement it, and we offer it as a service, and we do a pretty good business with that. So you're here to hear about it. How does AI automation all fit together, and how you get data into AI tools? And really the reason you're doing that is so that when you go to the bar tonight and you're talking to your buddies, you can say, hey, I do AI stuff and I'm super cool. And you know, that's the focus of the talk here. All right, there is a lot of different ways that data can be consumed in AI. I named the one, but these are 4 strong examples, really 4.5, because I had to make a little bit of a change to the presentation due to some technology that came out in the last 6 months after I submitted my presentation topic. But the first one I call is workplace stuffing. Every one of you could be doing this today. You've got customers with M365 environments. You have customers with Gemini Workspace. And if you're dumping data into those workspaces, those models pick that up and your customers can use it. We'll talk a little bit about that. The other way that you could be using AI today is by integrating it with third-party SaaS solutions. Because a lot of SaaS solutions, Salesforce, ServiceNow, HubSpot, they all have AI agents that are already built. They already have structured data. If you put the data into those models, it will be consumed and used. We'll talk more about that. And then we're going to talk about direct LLM and MCP itself. So we are going to talk a little bit about MCP today. If you don't know what that is, that's what's going to take up like the last 5-10 minutes. And then the most common of those first 2, they're very boring technically. They're not much fun to do if you're an engineer who does them. But if you're the boss of a company, that's where you're going to make the most of your money in this day and age. So I would focus on that third-party SaaS integration, to be honest. But we make money doing both of those right now. The more advanced models are more technically complicated. They're way more fun to work on in terms of if you're an engineer and you like to build things. But some of them you'll go down a rat hole and lose quite a bit of money trying to implement them, which let's talk about building your own model. Don't do this. And by building your own model, I mean going out, finding a model architecture that you want to use, standing up a model from scratch, going out, getting billions of data points, training that model. You got to build your own vectoring. You've got to normalize all that data. You then got to build the scripts to teach the model what you want it to do. And then you got to do that forever. And this is before you even put data in it. So of the 4 that I put up there, don't do this unless you're our competitor. Then I strongly recommend that you spend all your time and resources executing these. But in all seriousness, it's a pit. You don't want to go in there. There's so much available today that wasn't available in the past to be able to use existing models. So don't go build one. And so that leads to what rock did I climb out of to be able to be up here telling you this stuff. I used to be vice president of engineering at WebRoot prior to the OpenText acquisition. I've spent a decade plus building AI models. Sometime after the discovery of fire and before the invention of the wheel, there was AI modeling called map reduction. And map reduction was the precursor to things like neural nets and deep learning, which is just a bunch of neural nets mushed together. And so we used to do that a lot at WebRoot, load that data into the San Diego supercomputer. We had to build our own vectoring tools, all of that. This is why you don't want to do the thing that I was describing before. I've done that before. You don't need to do that. And then the other thing, I love automation, and I've been doing automation for 2 decades. I'm 54, if you're wondering, not that anybody's wondering, but I started in the mid-2000s using tools like MuleSoft. I used IBM Cast Iron before it was bought by IBM. I used Business Objects before it was bought by SAP. I used MuleSoft before it was bought by Salesforce. And I actually used BizTalk Server in the 2000s when they said they were going to end the life BizTalk, but it still exists today. I'm sure many of you know. So this is all BPA stuff. It's not RPA, but same idea. Anyway, that's my background. Love this stuff. Maybe I'm not the smartest person in the room on this, but I've made enough mistakes to know what you shouldn't do. A lot of times, love to talk about automation, AI, any of that. So please find me or reach out afterwards. All right, let's talk about the easy ones. Workspace stuffing. This is effectively the simplest thing you could do right now. You're all doing it. Your employees are doing it. Your customers are doing it. When they save an attachment to a SharePoint or a OneDrive site, they're manually doing this exact thing. And simply, you're making things available to Microsoft 365 Copilot, or you're making things available to Gemini inside of a Google workspace simply by putting things in that file location, and you're letting that AI model chew on it. And this is the simplest way of using it, but you have no control over what it finds, how it presents the results, but it is a benefit to your customers. So we need to call it out. The one that makes us the most money right now is doing third-party SaaS integrations. We'll walk through some. I made these slides, so they're super boring and dull and not very interesting in terms of aesthetics, but they kind of come across with the point. But this one is, because wait till you see the next slide. This one is all about effectively doing the same thing. You have some data set somewhere. Maybe it's a database. Maybe you're receiving emails. Maybe somebody's got a time entry system that you're pulling data from, and you need to push it into another system. And you're effectively pushing it into a formatted structure using a RESTful call or something like that. And then using the AI model inside of that system. You don't have any control over that, but it's probably more robust than just dumping something out into SharePoint or OneDrive or something like that. All right, so the super amazing graphics here that we have for you. Effectively, it's a simple flow, right? And again, we build these, we sell this right now. We have several customers that pay monthly for services like this. It eliminates manual tasks. It improves the efficiency of their work simply because somebody isn't making a mistake, and you can watch the automation, as you all know. So you receive an email, you validate it. Please, I came out of cybersecurity, whether you like Webroot or didn't like Webroot, we actually knew something about cybersecurity. Please validate authenticity of any kind of open call you have, because there are people not unlike me who would go out and try to jam up your external servers that are allowing things to come in. So just be aware of that. You have some type of listener, then you parse it. So maybe you're writing something in Python, or you have some type of external component that can parse that email and then save off the data into a data store. Same thing if it has an attachment, you strip the attachment off, save it to a data store. This is boring, but I have to include it here because these two are the absolute most common ways right now you can go to your customers and actually sell them something that does automation and that does AI. And those are both good selling points right now, and it makes really good revenue if you do it right. This one, the only difference here is like the fourth step and the last step, instead of saving that off to the OneDrive or the SharePoint or the Google Docs, what you're doing is you're actually just pushing it up into the SaaS through a RESTful call. You have to structure your data properly, and then you're letting the ServiceNow, the Kaseya, whatever their AI bot is, or Salesforce or HubSpot, you're letting it chew on the data you've already put in there. And the important thing to remember here is we, as engineers, like to build things because they're fun and cool. But what we really should be doing is making sure whatever our customers are using, however they're consuming the data. We need to figure out how to put it in front of them in a way that they can consume it natively. And that may be introducing Copilot because they don't use an AI tool at the moment, but it also, they could be using third-party tools already. And if you can put that data in front of them in a way they can consume it, you're doing the right thing for them. Rather than what I would rather do is build something new and exciting that nobody uses, but it's interesting. All right, next topic. Talk about RAG. I'm going to say that retrieval augmentation generation. So RAG was the coolest thing on the block since LLMs, up until the next topic. And what RAG lets you do is take unstructured data, and unstructured data is a bunch of documents that are in all kinds of different formats and all kinds of different, structures, and jam that into an LLM so that you have the ability to use that. And I'm sure things like, the things you'd be familiar with are like IT glue, even though there is structure there, it's not a perfect example. But basically anything where you can type in any way you want, you could use RAG to build that out, pull that data in, and then retrieve it. Now, there's two, I'm grossly oversimplifying this, there are two components to RAG. The one we're not going to talk about is retrieval. Retrieval is the component where you're configuring your LLM, for example, Microsoft Copilot, or ChatGPT or Gemini. You're configuring your LLM to be able to pull in the data that you've structured through the RAG interface. But we're not going to talk about that because that has nothing to do with automation. That has to do with configuring your LLM. You should go out, pull up, your favorite LLM and ask, how do I configure a retrieval interface for you, the LLM I'm currently using. What we are going to talk about is how do I take that unstructured data and then put that data into an LLM so that people can use it. And there's quite a few steps. I mean, you have to identify what it is you want to put into the LLM. You have to normalize it. You have to vectorize it. We'll talk about that in a minute. Then you have to load and split, and then away you go. You put it in a database, and it's ready to go. Simple as that. But all of that can be automated. It's very straightforward. You can automate it with literally 4 tools. You do need to know Python. You need to use LangChain. LangChain is manna from heaven if you used to have to vectorize data yourself because you used to have to build what LangChain does for you. You used to have to build all those libraries. You can use a vector, but none of these, LangChain I would recommend. Pinecone, it's great, but there's other vector databases out there you can find as well. And then you need an automation tool of your choice. We're not promoting anyone, but Roost is a great tool. It can do all of this for you. So if you have all that, the first step is identify your knowledge base. And that can be a bunch of Word documents sitting on someone's OneDrive. That could be a bunch of non-structured data sitting in a database somewhere, and how you got non-structured data in a database, I don't know, but good job on you. It could be a bunch of emails or things that come in. It could be an entire OneDrive folder, and it's all in different formats, and you don't know what to do with it. But you have to identify the data, probably isolate it to make sure it's kind of similar, and put it somewhere. And then what you do, and so what you can do is write an automation that picks that data up, analyzes it, and then you've got to normalize it. So you've got to write some kind of Python, or there are external functions. This is not LangChain at this point. This is some kind of function that you have to write to identify and understand what your data is, and then put it in a state that you can then work with it. So you're going to do a data normalization step. Again, so my 2 favorite functions in any automation tool are, let me run some Python and make a REST call, and then I pretty much ignore everything else. So you're going to do something here to process this. You could be making an external call, but again, you got to normalize your data. Then, once you've normalized it, you need to put it in a standard form. And the reason you need to do, and standard form doesn't mean I'm going to convert all my Word docs to a PDF. It does mean you're going to do that, but it also means you need to make sure it has the same tone. So you might actually have to run this data through some type of LLM process to put it in the same tone and say, normalize all this data into a single tone before I put it in a PDF. Because if you take a bunch of documents with different tones or different, I'm not talking the structure, it's the voice that the stuff was written in is the best example to give you. If you don't normalize all that, the LLM's gonna have a harder time processing it when you bring it back in. So this is an important step that when people say that they're gonna save off a standardized format, you are saving off from, maybe you standardize on all Word docs, maybe you standardize on PDFs, maybe you standardize on Google Docs. I don't know, but you also got to process the tone, kind of get somewhat similar layout. It doesn't have to be structured, but somewhat similar. You have to process that and get that ready. Then you got to vectorize and chunk that data. And so this is where libraries like LangChain come in. And what you do there is you feed your data in one at a time. And again, we're talking using an automation tool to call LangChain, which is it's a Python library. And that will vector, so let's talk about vectors. A vector, basically what you're doing is you're taking a document and you're doing math and you're getting a bunch of numbers, and that's vectors. And that's grossly oversimplified, but if you use LangChain, you don't need to know anything more about it than that. And so then, if you vectorize your data, you chunk it, and chunking is, I'm gonna take the data out of the document, and I'm gonna store it with my vectors. I'm gonna store that data in the text form, and so you're preparing that. So you vectorize, chunk your data, and you prepare it to then capture it, because then you have to put it into a database like Pinecone. And so this is the big tricky part. You've got all your documents, you normalize them, you then turn them into like a PDF or a Word format, you vector and chunk it, and now your vectors are a bunch of numbers, your chunks are a bunch of text. Then you capture all that stuff, you shoot it over into Pinecone, which is a SaaS solution, you don't download it, and now you have RAG data ready to go to put into an LLM. It's actually very simple. It sounds, probably because I'm not describing it well, a little complicated, but it's a very simple process you can easily build, and any automation tool flows that do this for you. If you have one data set, it never changes, and you only have to do this once. If you have a data set that's continuously updating, you would use this. And so what happens then? So you have this data set. When you type into ChatGPT or Copilot, when you're typing, it takes what you type and vectorizes that. And then it does a lookup inside the database and then returns and it's not as simple as it vectorizes it and then does a SQL index lookup and returns what it finds, but it's the same idea. It's not the same thing, but it's the same idea. And so that's what RAG is doing. I would ask for questions, but I'm gonna run out of time. And here, right here is where we were gonna go now and talk about, hey, I wanna set up some monitoring tools to be able to monitor this, or I was gonna do some discussion on the best practices out of engineering on how to set this stuff up. But Anthropic last November released something that kind of diverted the conversation, and we need to probably have a conversation about that. And I had to submit the proposal in December, and to be fair, I hadn't heard about MCP at the time. But MCP is something that is going to be profound. For those of you who can remember Netscape in about 1995, and then plugins came along and you could plug Flash in, et cetera, that literally is what MCP is to LLMs. It's in my view, and I'm no one of consequence, but in my view, it's the next big leap after LLMs. It is very important that, in my view, again, that we understand this, and I'm very excited, to hear what Aaron said on Wednesday, that they're beta testing an MCP server right now for Roost. And we'll talk a little bit about it. So unlike the RAG, where we were dealing mostly with unstructured data, this MCP is used primarily to open up a connection to allow LLMs to communicate and get data that's already been put in a format that can be consumed. But it also puts data, it also allows you to make calls to programs and execute things. So it's super interesting what's coming. So let's talk a little bit about MCP. And this is what we're going to talk about for the next 5 minutes, and then I'm done. So if you don't want to hear about MCP, I'm sorry. So LLMs. So we all know what an LLM is, but an MCP, what you do is someone says, here is my MCP endpoint, go to your LLM and configure it. And so Copilot, Gemini, ChatGPT, I'm not sure if Claude, I'm pretty sure it does, but I'm not 100% sure Claude. You can actually go into the settings, configure an MCP endpoint, and it's effectively a URL, just think a REST call. You're not sending a bunch of XML, but a REST call that you configure that is your MCP server. So you have to give someone that information and they configure it in the LLM. So what that means is you have to stand up an MCP server to be able to give that URL to somebody. And Roost is going to have the ability to stand up an MCP server. It'll be a component that you put into a flow. And that component is a listener. And it's literally just sitting there waiting for someone to call it and say, hey, do this thing. All right? And so the LLM's configured. It calls the MCP server in Roost. And by the way, Roost is a little bit ahead of the game. For example, if you want to do some Power Automate, and I'm very familiar with Power Automate, you have to actually configure MCP server in Azure right now. It's not native at the moment. You can't configure it in Power Platform. So Roost is really kind of ahead of the game, and it's super interesting that they're doing that and providing that capability. So you've configured your MCP server. Once your MCP server is configured, imagine your call in the LLM. It just has, this is a little oversimplified, but it just has a tag at the end of the URL that says the name of the process. And so you might have 5 processes running on this MCP server. And then, so you call it, you send the name of the process you want to execute. It makes a determination based on what you pass. And then one thing it could do is call that RAG database that we just set up a minute ago. Now that might not be the most efficient way to use RAG, but it could do it, right? So you could actually set up the MCP server. If it receives a certain command, it goes out, it pulls that RAG data, sends that data back into the LLM, then allows you to manipulate that data in the LLM as you would manipulate data that you got from the internet or wherever your data was coming from. You can generate reports, things like that. So it's very powerful in that way. Something else it could do is it could execute a flow that queries a database. And so now you're able to go out, run a process that you've configured that pulls data back, that maybe tickets, you want to see what tickets are open at a customer, but you want to do it through your LLM because you're fancy sitting at the bar and you want to impress your friends. You can configure it to give that back to you. And again, you could structure reports and things like that. But the real power is in this third thing, in that it'll execute any flow you create. It's not just about returning data to the LLM. You can use the LLM now to actually execute things. And just for your benefit, I had this beautiful idea last night when I was sitting upstairs with the Flow, or the Roost team, that I think many of y'all know Frank Price. He's the Chief Product Officer. Charlie Tomeo is Chief Revenue Officer at Roost. I am developing a crate that we can all implement, and we'll make it an MCP server, and all of us can use that crate, and it'll call them. I have their phone numbers, and we can just make it call them all the time, and just say, hey guys, we're thinking about you. And so when I publish that, I'll make sure you all know about it. We can implement it, and then everybody can use that just to make sure that they know we're thinking about them. But that's an example of what I'm trying to say is you can make these things do anything. And so the fact that we're going to see one here very soon, I think it was September, Might have been August. I don't want to. Anybody from Roost remember when that's supposed to come out and you want to yell it? September? Okay. That's the product guy because they're pushing it out a little longer. I'd like to see it in October or in August. But anyway, but this is hugely powerful for you because you're going to be able to, let's say we're all Microsoft 365 shops and we're implementing Copilot M365. We're going to be able to configure it. We're going to then be able to set up flows, whether they're internal or for our customers. We're going to be able to execute those flows and do actual functions. And then in the instances where we do want to return data to the LLM and use the power of the LLM, we're going to be able to do that as well. That's it. That's my last slide. And my name is David Dufour. I'm the CTO at Propulsion. There's my Xbox gamer tag, and if you play Star Citizen, I'm begging for people to play Star Citizen with me because nobody does, but I love the game. So I'm on LinkedIn. I genuinely love to talk about this. So if you don't want to talk about it here, you want to reach out next week, I would be hugely happy to have these discussions because I'm all about promoting this forward. And to be honest, I'm going to need some help implementing automation internally because I've completely ignored that to date because we're doing it with the customers, and maybe we could trade ideas if you're interested in doing it with your customers as well. That's it, and I thought somebody's going to kick me off the stage, but maybe I'm done early. Oh, there. All right, great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.